It's nice of you to join us once again for this, another edition of the Coaching Hour. A very warm welcome from myself, Paul Rotherham. I'm joined by Mary and Mareka. Together, we are Coaches Network South Africa. If you haven't yet checked us out on the socials, please do so. We have a Facebook presence and some other interesting links we'll share with you as well at the end of this podcast. We're joined today. This is part 2 of a series with Jared Shippel. Mareka's going to just, I think, give us a quick recap on what we covered last week in case you missed it, and also just reintroduce Jared for if this is the first time you are listening to him and watching this podcast. A very warm welcome, Mareka.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul. We had Jared guest last time for the first session of the series where we spoke about psychological safety in organizations. It was quite insightful and it's a huge topic. So I'm glad that we are doing a series because there's so many aspects of psychological safety that's important. And today we're going to focus on bringing psychological safety in teams, how to develop resilient teams. But just to quickly introduce Jared, if this is your first time joining us, he's a leadership coach and organizational strategist, and he helps companies to build psychological safety for high performing teams. So thank you so much for once again joining us, Jared.
Thanks so much for having me back and putting up with my nonsense.
No, it's very insightful. And I mean, I've learned quite a lot from our last session. I think we had so many questions. And it's good that we have a second session today and focusing on resilience and psychological safety. Can you maybe tell us what the difference is between psychological safety and resilience?
Um, that's an unusual question. Normally, resilience is actually brought about by psychological safety,
Mm,
in part. Resilience is also something that's internal. So resilience is kind of the bridge between the psychological safety that's created in businesses, that ability to have tough conversations at an adult level, okay, where people feel that they are welcome, they are part of the team, they're part of that business or environment. Resilience, in short, is our ability to bounce back.
mm,
So whether as an individual, whether as a team, how do we manage the challenges that we face? So I
yes.
think let's be honest, there isn't a team on the planet, there isn't a person on the planet who hasn't had some kind of difficulty or challenge, and I'm prepared to share some of the challenges I've had,
Mm,
especially over the past couple of years, and and why I got so much more involved in resilience was because of that. I used my own experiences that I've used within teams, and those techniques to make it a team that is able to work their way through or around the challenges, but in a way that leaves them stronger and not fractured. When you come back, it's not a case of we're a weaker team. We're stronger from the lessons we've learned, and that's really what resilience is about. It's pushing through the challenges. Often South Africans, in particular, we called a very resilient nation. Go take a look at the entire history of this country, not just the recent history over the last 200 years. And we are the sort of people that embody what resilience is. Now, what we've just done is distill that down into the teams that you work in, and how do we take those aspects of bounce back ability and mindset that resilience embodies, and grow the team, the organization, and in so doing, that's what creates psychological safety at the at all levels. Yeah.
What's the difference between the toughness and resilience in business?
Okay, great question. So that's the question I get a lot more often. So being tough means you can take pressure. It means you can just plug on. It doesn't mean you're actually looking after yourself or the people underneath you. So if I go back to some of the generational work that I've done with people, especially when they've gone through a difficult period, if you take a look at what it would be like my parents and grandparents, you just got on with it. You didn't tell people about your problems. You weren't open about it. They were very tough people. They had to suck it up, you know. Um, Resilience is not about that. Resilience is about actually something quite different. It's about being vulnerable and growing from that, having trust in the people who work around you, and growing from that. Um, and a very important thing, and it's something we spoke about in terms of psychological safety, and this is really where the similarities come in, is that there has to be a shared accountability with everyone involved in that situation. So, with psychological safety as the leader, in a particular situation, I need to make sure that I am humble enough to make sure that my subordinates, my employees are in a good place and they feel that they can be as productive as possible, but there's a give and take. They also are accountable back to me to make sure that they do what they need to do and they do the work. Because, being resilient is not something that's really naturally inborn in everyone. Much like the leadership debate. Can you create a leader, or are you born a leader? Are you born resilient, or can you become resilient? It's yeah, so interesting question, Mary. But yeah, and unfortunately we've been fed that we have to be tough. We can't let people know about any of the struggles that we have. And in my case particularly, that's exactly the point where I took what I've learned. So I'm not sure if I've mentioned it for those people who might be watching and don't know. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2024.
Sure.
Okay. And um, it's a shock. It's horrifying. It's terrifying. And what I did was I took the principles that I use myself in coaching, in leadership development, in building strong organizations. So I'm not just your run-of-the-mill sort of coach. I look at ways that we can actually help people bounce back from the struggles they have. So not everyone has cancer. Not everyone has. So some people lose a loved one. Some people have their business crumble in front of them. They've got to bounce back in some way. How do they do that? So it really comes down to confronting your challenges and confronting them in a way that you show your vulnerability, you show your fallibility, like we spoke about before, and you use it as a learning curve. You have to be humble in that way. So I'm sure you've got tons more questions, and I'd rather let you guys ask away and guide this. But the core and the mentality that I had, if I can just share that, was I addressed the problem head on. I confronted it, said I'm going to kill the cancer rather than it kill me. I tapped into my entire network. Okay. And when you're in a team, you have an immediate network of supporters and collaborators and confidence right there. Why in heaven's name would someone not want to lean on someone else and be that crutch or someone else can lean on? And that's where the work really starts happening. And that, funnily enough, builds psychological safety. Being tough breaks it down because you don't have the communication.
I wanted to add something, Jared, and you've raised your parents, your grandparents as an example. And I think I'm probably around your age, 52 now. For me, if I have a look at my parents and grandparents and those generations, there was a distinct lack of vulnerability. There was a constant, we've got this, we can do this, we don't need help. And at the time, I think that in a way was viewed as normal, particularly for me being British, because if you were British, you never cried, you never showed your emotions, you never told someone you loved them, you certainly never asked anybody for help, and you got on with it and made a plan. And I
Yes.
think through that, my journey has been, and I can say this with some humility and in trying to be humble, my journey has taken me from somebody who was very much like that to someone who is now more vulnerable, more open with my feelings, more expressive with my emotions. And in my experience, I've found that the label of toughness does almost dissipate when you're like that. It doesn't mean you're less resilient, but the whole idea of being tough and macho, unfortunately, those are labels that I have found still stick to the typical macho behavior of not showing vulnerability, not being expressive, not being emotional, not shedding a tear. And it's sad, really, because I think it's probably quite male dominant in many ways, in that if you're a man, here's the list of things that you should do and the list of things that you shouldn't do. And I find a lot of the modern content that we discuss on the coaching hour actually scraps all of that and chucks it out the window. And I think slowly but surely society is coming round to it. It's just something I wanted to touch on because just because you can share your emotions or express your feelings or have a cry at a whatever it might be
Mm.
stirred emotionally, I don't think means that you are any less tough. Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
I could give
So,
countless examples of men who are able to show their emotions and be vulnerable, but at the same time can do 100 push-ups in 2 minutes and run a marathon in under 3 hours and do whatever society previously would have given the definitions of being tough as. So I think the language that we use has changed. And I mean, I think about myself, I'm not
true.
in a corporate environment and I don't really have any desire to move back into that. But if I was, I would relate very well and be far more giving of my time to a male leader who did show all of those traits that I've mentioned: vulnerability, humility, being humble, sharing emotions, versus somebody who had the old dictatorship style, who thought that they had it right and got it right all the time and didn't need anybody to show them otherwise. I think that we are moving through a transformation process in leadership there. I think we're not there yet, but we are getting there.
So I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, if we take a look at something that actually is quite, for some, in some instances, it actually is quite disturbing. Um, we know that the corporate world was really or has been really dominated by males. It's phenomenal that it has changed to the extent it has, and it still has to become more male female equal. But but I always like asking the deeper question, and that for me is, what persona is that very capable, very intelligent woman taking on? Is she taking on a persona where she needs to be, excuse me for saying, but the hard ass, the toughest person in the room so that she can play with the guys and show them that she's better? Or does she bring what is actually needed? That element of vulnerability when it's needed and toughness when it's needed. Just like, and it sounds ridiculous, but just like a mother would do, a proper caring mother. Now, I don't want this to become like a family sort of conversation, but what has happened is that teams kind of think they have to be one or the other. And you're 100% right. They can be both. You need to know when to have those boundaries. The boundaries that we set dictate the entire culture of what we are creating. So it was interesting. I was having a discussion with someone yesterday. It happens to be a mechanical engineer, a mining engineer, sorry, and he started talking about Conway's law. And Conway's law, just to sum it up very briefly, is it doesn't matter what the policy says, but if a leader acts in a particular way, everyone sort of models themselves after that person. Who's the dominant figure within that team? Who's the dominant figure within that organization? Because that's the perceived persona or culture of the organization. And if you take a look at the research that's going on at the moment, it's basically saying people are feeling lonely, people are feeling sad, they're feeling angry in the workplace at an ever increasing rate. They are more and more disengaged. It's costing businesses an astronomical amount. So just to give you one scary stat, loss of productivity because of all of these things, stress, burnout, and this is according to Gallup, cost the world $9.4 trillion in the past year. Okay. If I drill that down into just your upper mid-level managers to senior managers, they have the engagement worldwide has dropped by probably around 3%, which in and of itself has dropped productivity by around $480 billion. We're talking enough to support most countries on the planet. And that's where businesses are throwing things away. And what are they throwing away? They're throwing away their own money in terms of productivity, their ability to service their clients, their ability to maintain the health and wellness of and happiness of the people who work in that organization, not just the junior level people or mid-level, but the executives as well, because the pressure on them is immense. Try going 60 years through your life, and you've got to be tough, and you can't be vulnerable to anyone. You've got to be that bastion of strength. And unfortunately, what's happened is that some people, through no fault of their own, just literally societal programming and the way they have been taught how to do business, are feeling that this is an environment where it's still that production line. I'm the foreman. I need to make sure that everyone steps in line because someone will get hurt. Okay? The army approach, the production line approach. Whereas if I start having what Amy Edmondson calls a safe conversation, okay, she created something called the SAFE model, SAFE leadership model. So each of the letters in the acronym stands for something. So the first is signal openness. Be open. Be prepared to actually have open discussions and invite feedback and even pushback from the people who work within your team. That's just the first one. Then the second one is admit your mistakes. If something doesn't happen, have the courage of your convictions to say, I did something wrong. How do I rectify it? How do I grow from this? The F is frame any kind of challenges as a learning event. How do we learn from this? And that it sits hand in hand with the admitting mistakes. And lastly, and this is the one that I think is we spoke about so much, is encourage, what she calls encourage voice. So encourage people to speak up, share, stop being silent, because silence and acquiescence leads to a whole lot of things that much smarter people than myself and psychologists talk about, like groupthink. And if everyone really pushes in the same direction, well, not pushes in the same direction, everyone just agrees that the voice that's most dominant is the correct one, often we find that we are losing out on ingenuity, inventiveness, innovation, and sometimes the decisions are just plain wrong. Okay, and that silence, no, sorry, not that silence, but that perceived need to be silent because I'll be punished, leads people to drop off, leave a business. Replacement costs are high, like we spoke about. To become less productive and to silently quit, much more insidious. With trade unions, go slows were bad. Well, this is a go slow. That's effectively what it is. And most companies have done the calculations. The costs are astronomical. And
Jared, you've given the
yeah,
word safe, which I think speaks to the leadership style in the sense of what leaders should be doing. But I know that
yes.
one of our questions collectively was, how do these leaders actually create resilient teams? Obviously, there's some side of that is about you as a leader and what you need to do. But in practice, how do these corporates wake up and start creating resilience in the workplace? Simple steps,
Simple
if
steps.
we can simplify it.
So let's start by actually being introspective. The leaders within businesses need to understand, where are my challenges actually lying? Because it starts there, understanding what is causing the pain in the organization, and having that courage to be with themselves and actually analyze that and say, well, this is where those problems are lying. Then to start reframing things in a different way is crucial, and that's a very well-known psychological practice. How can we look at things differently? So I like to take an approach that is really, how are things now, an as is approach, and as they should be. So while many people are unable to really just deal with the emotional aspect because that's the way they're wired, that's great, that's fine. But what is the desired outcome? How do I create that desire in people? And those are the questions we need to be asking. Is this a fear-driven business? And we can find out in any number of ways. There's so many diagnostics and assessments out there. For clients, I run diagnostics to try and help them. In some cases, it's not even necessary because the problem is so tangible that they say, this is what we need to actually focus on. So it's about having those conversations and understanding what is it that will make you feel safe. And this is where we're talking about resilience to a large extent, and breaking down those shackles of being tough, or that wall. If I can be honest about what makes me feel welcome within a business, valued in a business, and you're not going to jump down my throat as my manager, Paul, then I'm going to be more open and more honest. And that's where the safety comes from. The ability to be honest without repercussions that are going to be punitive or negative for me.
Now, it's like you said earlier, it's like being a good parent almost. If I bring it back to kids, they
Yeah.
hide things from you if they're scared of how you're going to react if they broke something or did something wrong. So it's the same principle. And I'm sure leaders out there have the best intentions. They maybe, with all good intentions, they want to create psychological safety. They want their people to, be productive and be happy and be involved, etc. But we make mistakes. So what are some of those, mistakes that leaders make in trying to create psychological safety?
So the biggest mistake that I've seen is they tend to one way or the other. They become either too punitive or too nice. Okay, that exact same little mantra that our parents used to tell us, or most dietitians will tell you, everything in moderation. That's literally the simplest way to put it. Um, and that, or what we're really saying is create those boundaries, boundaries that are going to enable me to know when do I need to be a bit harder, when do I need to be softer, and the real challenge is often we can't see that in ourselves, and that's where coaches, consultants, an external third party who doesn't have the same vested interest in that organization, or the level of vested interest in that organization as the leader. And this is literally why executive coaching, resilience coaching is essential. The the challenge comes in when those leaders do not actually know how to bounce back themselves, because there will be setbacks. And this is really where a lot of my practice as an organizational strategist comes in. It's working with that team, working with that leader to see what should be obvious, okay, and then give them the strategies, the techniques, the practices to bounce back. I mean, I see it in myself. I don't see my own challenges sometimes. I know what the challenges are, but it's kind of like a healer who needs to heal themselves. You can't. You have to rely on other people, and being tough will just maybe allow me to put a plaster on the wound, but I don't get to the root cause. And you need that diagnostician, that medical doctor. Okay, and I use the term loosely because while coaches and consultants and those external third parties I'm talking about are not medical people, choosing the right one who has the experience in the field that you really need is far more important, and if they've worked through it with other businesses and themselves. And that's so if I sum it up into maybe 3 points: boundary and humilities, better communication, that's fair communication, both listening and giving, and then also making the right choices of who to help and when you need to be helped and by whom.
Yes. So Jared, it seems like self-awareness plays a big role. I mean, I think one of the mistakes I would say, leaders sometimes make is that they send their team for coaching, strategy, training, whatnot, so that the team can collaborate better and be more cohesive, etc., with the leader sitting, as a spectator almost, not being part of that. So maybe as a final question, what is the value in a leader to first look within, and what's the value of having, like an executive coach or leadership coach that will firstly help them? Because how can you expect others to change and improve if you're not willing to really look, and do the same for yourself?
So the mindset and the values that you're talking about, and it feeds back into the question that you just asked before. This needs to be seen as a systemic issue as opposed to a once-off quick fix.
Mm.
Okay. You'll find in some cases that this becomes an HR issue, and it's not. Psychological safety can't also be lumped on HR. That's a division of a business that pretty much runs everything from your industrial relations and your payroll but it has become the backstop for leaders to excuse me, for leaders to say, this is too warm and fuzzy for me. I'm gonna put it to those lovely people in there, and maybe, and I'm being very facetious now. If you've ever seen, there's a couple of movies that portray this well, but go to HR and they'll give you a stress ball to squeeze, okay? And if that's what it's about, we've lost the plot completely. Everyone within an organization has to be accountable, has to be involved. This is not an HR issue. This is actually an operational issue where the people who deal with it all the time are those operational people, those leaders who need to learn that operations has two streams. You've got the technical or the actual uh, functions within the business. And then you've got that human side, and they have to run in parallel because the one doesn't exist without the other. The other thing that we need to realize is that if you run a workshop, great, wonderful. It's not going to solve the problem, okay? It has to be an ongoing, continuous approach to things. And yeah, executives sometimes misunderstand that. They don't realize. They think we can throw a bit of money at it. Let's go on that team build. Team build is great if it's done right, in conjunction with a whole lot of other interventions. And ultimately, if I'm with a client, I don't want to be there forever. I want them to be capacitated to the point where they can actually manage this themselves. Some of the best organizations to work for in South Africa, I mean, I go back to the days when I did some work with Ernst & Young, and for 2 years running, they were the best business to work with in South Africa. Why? They implemented a major company-wide diversity program, but it wasn't run by external facilitators. The program was designed by an expert in the field, but the chairman and members of the board and the COO actually facilitated the sessions themselves. They were crucially involved, and in so doing, they were learning, okay, so this is what people are like on the ground. These are the challenges. I can relate to that. We're going to have proper discussions around this, and now I can actually see myself in them, and I can do the hard work as well and be just as vulnerable in front of them as they need to be in front of me.
I think you've repeated a word there that's resurfaced a few times, and that is vulnerable, openness. What I'm hearing in everything that you've said, or many of the things that you've said today, Jared, is that this really does come down to the leaders at the end of the day. It can be driven as hard as you like from the bottom up, but if the gates are closed and the drawbridge isn't down, it doesn't matter how hard you push back. The leaders, I think, are the more important pieces of this jigsaw puzzle, in my humble opinion. And perhaps there's time for you as a leader to reflect on your leadership style, your management style, what you are doing, and what your role is in contributing to perhaps the dynamic within the workplace. Because it's very easy when you're at the top of the tree to look down and blame it on everyone below you. But sometimes perhaps a little bit of introspection and some accountability could come in handy.
So I want to just add one thing to what you said there, Paul. A leader doesn't, and I mentioned this last week, leader doesn't have to be in a position of top leadership within the organization. It doesn't have to be the C-suite or the exco. It we have you have smaller groups, working groups throughout, people who are in any kind of leadership position or who lead others have to take accountability. So yes, while the general direction within an organization is run by those guys who sit around the boardroom table and make big decisions, it's sometimes those little decisions that actually filter throughout the business. So I see it in a similar way to what Malcolm Gladwell talks about. He talks about in his book, The Tipping Point, about epidemics. An epidemic can be bad, or an epidemic can be absolutely amazingly great. Okay. It's what are we actually doing? Are we creating a cancer or an illness that runs through the business, crippling it? Or do we do what high performance teams do and find the positivity and the strengths in each member of that team and play to those? Because then that ripples through the business. And that's where a lot of really top modern leaders are actually taking it. They are doing the hard work. And some of those, interestingly, are guys in their 60s and women in their 60s. So you don't have to be a product of the generation that you just happen to be born into. That toughness can be broken down. But you know what leaders must do is understand that they aren't going to be judged by their personality. They're judged by the results, the people whose lives they affect. And when we start asking ourselves questions like that, that's where the reframe comes. That's where organizations suddenly say, okay, we've had this problem, but we can overcome it. We can be a resilient organization, a resilient team, or a resilient leader. A lot of leaders are exposed to more problems, more challenges than we were 50, 60 years ago as well. Social media has caused huge problems for a number of people. The political landscape, you name it, and being able to get past those, get your proverbial mojo back after you've hit a slump. That is the tough element that leaders are really facing, and it's a lot more prevalent than you may realize. Just one last thing, and this came from my cancer journey, and it'll give you an idea of how hitting something that's really tough can change a person. So along my journey, I met a guy who was a senior engineer at a huge business in Midrand. They do defense products and everything. And he said to me, and he seemed like an absolutely lovely guy, amazing, brilliant with everyone. He said, before my cancer, before I had my challenge, I was a horrible person. I didn't care about other people. I would come into a room, I'd bark orders, things needed to get done. And if they didn't get done, heads rolled. These are his words. Okay?
Sorry, Jared, was he speaking about you or about himself?
About himself.
Okay, so he had cancer as well.
He had cancer as well. Sorry. So I met him on my cancer journey. He was in stage 4. Unfortunately, he just passed away recently. But he was a gentleman. He was about 66, 67. Okay. And the challenge that he had to deal with, and we all have, as I said, cancer is only just one sort of challenge. But the challenge he faced was that. And he had to let go of this old persona and to, as he would put it, live with grace. Okay. And that grace is something that leaders really need to develop. Not grace for others, grace for yourself. You need to be self-forgiving, and so doing, you're going to look at people in a way that is more welcoming, more inclusive, and where there can be reciprocal vulnerability as well.
They say that you can't teach old dogs new tricks, but I think I would disagree with that and say that you're never too old to learn, and certainly never too old to change. In these podcasts, for instance, we hope that no matter where you are on your journey, that somehow you find the content insightful, and that perhaps you reflect on your own life and maybe make changes in your own world and in your own life, because the butterfly effect is a real thing. It really is. Make a small change today, and the difference not even in a long time. The difference can be immediate in what happens around you, the people who experience your presence, your company, both literally and metaphorically if you're in a business. So, Jared, thank you very much. Part 2, this has
Thank you
been.
for having me.
We've been talking all about psychological safety, and this episode has been focusing on resilience. We will pop all of the links to Jared's website and where you can find him on his various platforms in this video, which will be shared on Facebook. We're going live on Facebook at the moment. Thank you if you've been watching it live. And thank you, in fact, if you've been watching it after we recorded this. We do appreciate it. And our other platforms as well, Mareka, just to mention very briefly.
Yes, on Spotify and then our YouTube channel, The Coaching Hour.
Fabulous. Find us there. We'll look forward to wrapping up this series with you, Jared, in the next installment of The Coaching Hour. It's brought to you in partnership with Coaches Network South Africa, and look forward to your company in the next one. From myself, Paul, bye for now.